I know what some of you are going to say, that any form of contact with spirits is dangerous and unholy. I'm not here to convince you of anything, but I can tell you that nothing about that night felt sinful. The energy in that dark little room was pleasant, almost reassuring. The voices were soft and strangely familiar, even though I couldn't place where I'd heard them before. I counted 5 in total, 2 feminine and 3 masculine, 4 speaking purely in Russian, and 1 speaking what I thought was French. The flames snuffed themselves out, some after only a few minutes, and some after almost a half an hour. Although the candles were unscented, the room smelt of honey after all of the flames had extinguished themselves. Babs stood up and turned the lights on afterwards. She smiled brightly at me, her eyes watery with happy tears. "Who were they, Babs?" I asked her as we cleaned up. "5 who I loved who are no longer with us," she answered. "You did very good job, moi Millie. We can listen, but it is not good for us to speak. Again, we will do it next year. I will teach you how, if you like." Afterwards, she sent me off to bed. I fell asleep that night with a lightness in my chest and the promise of warm kulich in the morning. My babushka passed away on January 3rd of this year, and I've been a wreck ever since. I'm ashamed of how emotional I've been, especially considering that Babs lost her entire family and was still one of the strongest, most stoic people I've ever known. I've tried to follow her example and remain strong in the face of adversity, but I feel as though I've lost both of my parents, and God knows my actual parents have been no help. Although I've lived with my fiancé for the past few years, we live in an apartment close to the house I grew up in and still saw Babs often. Unsurprisingly, Babs left the house to me and not my parents. At first, the thought of selling it seemed like an act of betrayal, but it's too small for my fiancé and I, our dogs, and the children we're hoping to have one day soon. I visit the house every once in a while to sort through her possessions and figure out what kind of repairs it needs, but the place feels so empty without her that I'm never able to stay for long. A few days ago, I had the idea to spend Holy Saturday in the house. My girlfriend isn't religious, so she wouldn't mind being left alone for the night, and I thought that doing so might finally bring me the closure I needed. Yesterday, I showed up to the house in the early evening. I had 1 bag with clothes and blankets and another with a few sentimental items. For a few hours, I just walked around the rooms, examining every little crack in the wall and chip in the wooden floors. Even mostly empty, the house still overflowed with memories, and I consumed them desperately, knowing that someday they might be lost to me forever. Every so often, I reached out to rap my knuckles against one of the walls or floors. Knock, knock, knock. At around midnight, after setting up my sleeping bag in my childhood bedroom, I made my way to the dining room, which was one of the few rooms in the house to still have most of its furniture. I had brought some kulich in my bag, which I snacked on as I set up the old wooden table with the items I'd brought, a nesting doll, a photo of myself, my mom, and Babs, and the handwritten eulogy I delivered at my grandmother's funeral, much of which I had written in Russian. I also placed upon the table a long, thin candle that I'd found while sorting through Babs's belongings. Then, I lit the candle, took a seat, and listened. Nothing happened. No whispers, no self-extinguishing of the candle, nothing. An hour passed. I had finished my kulich, and the candle had burnt itself down to a nub, but instead of giving up and calling it a night, I snuffed the flame myself and lit another. I didn't want to let go just yet. Again I waited, straining my ears and silently imploring Babs to speak, but there was only silence. When candle number 2 had burned itself down to nothing, I extinguished it and procured from my bag the final candle I had brought with me. One last try, I told myself, one last try and then I'll go to sleep. I lit the candle and waited. Just after 3:30, I realized that I was beginning to nod off. Remembering that I hadn't plugged my phone into the portable charger I had brought with me, I rose from my chair and took a quick stroll to my old bedroom. I reached into my bag, pulling out the charger. "Kolya?" someone called out. "Yeah," I called back and then froze. I had responded without thinking, acting completely on instinct. That had been Babs's voice. I was certain of it. The sound should have filled me with delight, but instead, something felt wrong. The voice had been too loud, nothing like the soft whispers that I remembered from years past. Along with the strange tone of the voice